Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to today's tropical weather outlook for May 30th, 2026. Today, we're going to talk about why there will be potentially a quite active period of activity coming up in the Pacific, and it starts with an area of development that already has a high chance of turning into a tropical cyclone in the next several days. I'm pretty sure you are well aware about it. We're of course going to talk about that, but we're also going to go over any other signals and signals that are popping up beyond what might occur here in the Pacific in the next several days. So a very active period coming up. I'm going to go over why and what exactly to look for. So lots to go over in today's video. Glad to have you along. Let's get started by taking a look at the National Hurricane Center homepage, and you can see one of our first areas that we will be monitoring, and the first area of interest for the Pacific hurricane season this year. This was tagged about 2 days ago. Already up to an 80% chance today, as of the 11 a.m. advisory or 11 a.m. bulletin Pacific time, but 2 o'clock Eastern time for those living along the East Coast. Again, already up to an 80% chance of development in the next 7 days. And this is going to be a broad area of low pressure that'll develop here from the intertropical convergence zone, and it's going to break off and quickly become a named storm and probably become something that'll stay out to sea and be very weak and definitely stay well away from the Mexican coastline and not be a threat to land whatsoever. But this will be a name. It will be the first. It is looking increasingly likely, I should say, that it could be the first potential tropical storm of the Pacific hurricane season. And as I'll show you in a little bit, it is probably the first in what will be multiple storms to watch here over the next several weeks in the Pacific. Here's to take a look at the satellite imagery right now. And, before we actually move on, why not show you what's happening in the Atlantic right now? I was about to move on without showing the bulletin for the Atlantic, but I guess they can't help it. But here's the bulletin anyways for what is going on in the Atlantic. Nothing right now happening over the next 7 days, and so far it looks like it is probably going to stay that way for the foreseeable future, although maybe down the line that could change, and I have talked about it briefly over the last several days, and maybe I'll touch upon it a little bit in today's video. Here's the satellite imagery, though. Now we're moving on to the satellite shot of the Atlantic and the Pacific from NOAA, and props up to NOAA for producing beautiful satellite pictures for us. This is a true color shot, and this literally shows you every single detail of our Earth, and it really goes to show how beautiful our planet is. And taking a look at the satellite imagery, you could see across the tropics, not much happening, neither in the tropical Atlantic or the Pacific. Quite a bit of convection here near the northern coast of South America. I do believe there is a tropical wave embedded in this, and it is heading towards the southern portion of the Lesser Antilles here, but no development expected. And then we also have some tropical convection here in the eastern Pacific, and this area right here is where we will actually need to watch for development of our first system here in the eastern Pacific, as again it's going to probably arise from something that'll try to consolidate here in the intertropical convergence zone over the next several days. So let's take a look and see what the models are exactly showing will play out here. Let's take a look at the GFS, the 12Z run, again as of May 30th. And let's take it out in time here, and you can see over the next several days we start off first kind of just a broad area of vorticity, again embedded within the intertropical convergence zone, which, by the way, if you're not familiar with that term, basically means a broad area near the equator of showers and thunderstorms that is a product of the conversion of winds from the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. And that's basically what it is. But from time to time, in both the Atlantic and the Pacific, although this is a case as to an occurrence happening in the Pacific, or at least this instance here, over time, as we get showers and thunderstorms to develop, a low pressure sometimes tries to form, and as you can see here, that is what happens. roughly starting around 2 days out. And then as we get towards 3 and 4 days out, so early to mid next week, you could see that it goes from a broad area of strung out vorticity to something that consolidates. You start to see these vorticity shades become darker, and you then start to get these closed isobars indicating closed low-level pressures, and that definitely then leads to tropical development, as you can see here. That's definitely the signature of a tropical cyclone that the GFS is forecasting. And then the GFS kind of has this weird situation where it shows two tropical systems here, but I'm pretty sure that only one of them is going to develop. The GFS, as you know, has a bias where it likes to take vorticity and really run with it. So it kind of is a little overzealous, but the general idea that we will get a low pressure here that will consolidate and probably develop into a weak tropical storm briefly for a few days before it moves on off to the northwest and kind of dies out by the end of next week. Definitely a plausible idea, and certainly something that has enough confidence that the National Hurricane Center is starting to take notice. And then, as we get towards the end of the 7-day time frame, you can already see where our next area is in terms of what we will be needing to watch for in the Pacific, and that is going to come from Central America, where we will have the Central American gyre set up. Broad area of vorticity developing over Central America as we have strong trades in the Caribbean and weaker trades in the Eastern Pacific, and that's going to help create this area of broad, low pressure, lots of moisture, and that's definitely going to help fuel something in the Pacific, especially closer to Mexico and Central America here as we get into the 1 to 2 week time frame, and it's already beginning to show up here on the GFS. And I'll show you this area here on the ensembles in just a moment. But really quickly, let's take a look at the European and see, do they show something also developing out here as well? And yes, they do. You can really see it getting going here. An area of vorticity, it consolidates, and that's definitely the look of a weak tropical storm here that develops. And again, it develops, it breaks off from the intertropical convergence zone here, moves northwest, but then it dies out by the time we get to this time next week, so roughly in about 7 days from now, and then it'll probably fizzle out, and not be of much concern. So both the GFS and the European are showing something. What about the ensembles? I like to look at the ensembles, especially to kind of validate whatever the operational models are showing, to kind of, take a look at all of the options that we have and see if all of the options agree with each other. Trying to get multiple, it's like kind of like you're trying to get down to the truth, and you're trying to get multiple different perspectives and witnesses, and you're all trying to see if the storyline matches up. That's basically what we're doing with the models here. And yeah, the GEFS ensembles, at least the GFS ensembles, they have a pretty solid signal of a low pressure here coming out of the intertropical convergence zone. And most of the ensembles stay weak, but it is a signal nonetheless. The European ensembles as well also have something really getting going here, and most of the ensembles seem to show something. You have 1 or 2 ensembles showing a potentially strong storm, but I don't think that's the very likely outcome. But in the very least, some sort of tropical system that gets going here, definitely being indicated by the ensembles as well on the European, and as well on the Google AI ensembles too. So all 3 major ensemble plots here that I typically like to look at, they all show a clear-cut signal that something will try to develop here in the Eastern Pacific over the next several days, at least in the western part of the Eastern Pacific, and then move out to sea. But then, on the other hand, we also have a pretty defined signal as well beginning to show up near Central America, and this really begins to pop off as we get into the 7 to 10 day time frame and beyond. So this is going to be the 1 to 2 week time frame that we really got to start watching close to Central America and Mexico. And just to really quickly show you the European ensembles, do they have it? Yes, they do. They have something here trying to get going with a few ensembles showing even potentially a strong storm as well. And also the Google AI ensembles too. And especially if you want to put a lot of stock into AI, the AI ensembles are, interestingly enough, the most aggressive right now out of all the three ensembles. But all three of them have a signal for something happening about 1 to 2 weeks out now, near the far eastern Pacific, closer to the Mexican coastline and Central America. And this will be a very interesting signal because, as I just said, this will be close to the Mexican coastline and close to Central America. So if there's any potential threat to land in the Eastern Pacific here over the next 1 to 2 weeks, I think it'll come from this area that we'll need to watch here within the next 1 to 2 weeks. And why is that going to be the case? Is this actually just a model signal that the models have right now, but they're going to drop maybe in about a week or so? I don't think so. And one of the reasons why is, as I've been talking about for the last several weeks, the MJO is going to move into the Pacific, and in fact, it's already doing so right now, and we can see that here with the velocity potential map from the European ensemble, map production, I guess. And you can see here the greens and blues representing rising motion. First, we had one wave that traversed the Pacific for the last several weeks, and that's probably helping prime the system that we're watching right now here in the western part of the Eastern Pacific. And of course, that's not going to do much, but the initial MJO passage is moving through right now and has been moving through over the last several days. That's what's probably helping prime this system. And then the MJO is going to last, and it looks like we're going to have another wave that'll really, come on strong here around the first to second week of June. And this is probably what's going to help with any other development that happens in the Eastern Pacific. And then, interestingly enough, beyond that, especially as we get towards mid to late June, we start seeing a pretty solid signal for a rising motion standing wave to develop here in the Pacific. And as I mentioned earlier this week, that's a signal of the El Nino really beginning to come on strong in the atmosphere. So maybe as we get towards mid to late June, we might start to see more consistent activity in the Eastern Pacific, and probably throughout the entire Pacific as well. And as we have the MJO moving through, we're also going to have a westerly wind burst, which is ongoing right now in the Eastern Pacific, and that's also going to continue to spread throughout the equatorial Pacific in general over the next several days. And having strong westerly wind bursts here helps El Nino. Obviously, I think we all know that by now. But it also helps tropical cyclone activity as well, as it weakens the trades and allows for low-level vorticity to be able to spin up and concentrate easier. So westerly winds and favorable MJO, I mean, they kind of already go hand in hand, but the fact that we have both, very favorable things for the atmosphere here over the next several weeks, especially the next 1 to 2 weeks here in the Eastern Pacific, when we will probably be needing to watch for more tropical development. And then on the other hand, sea surface temperature anomalies, as I've been mentioning, are very, very warm in the Eastern Pacific right now, especially near the coast of Mexico. We have some anomalies here as warm as 2, maybe even 3 degrees Celsius above normal. And obviously, we have an El Nino developing out here in the Eastern Pacific, and that's probably going to blow up quite a bit over the next several weeks as well. But I've especially been sounding the alarm on these very, very warm anomalies here near the Mexican coastline, and they might already help fuel the fire for a signal here that we might need to watch in the next 1 to 2 weeks near Mexico. I mean, whatever area that we will watch develop is going to literally track right over these very, very warm anomalies again. Almost the entire area at least a degree Celsius above normal, and some of these anomalies here as much as 2 to even 3 degrees Celsius above normal. So that's absolutely going to be rocket fuel for anything that does try to develop here in the Eastern Pacific. And as I said before, I would not be shocked if we have a hurricane, maybe even a major hurricane, in the next 2 weeks or so that tries to develop here in the Eastern Pacific. Even though it's early on in the season, even though it's June, it's happened before, and it also tends to happen as well in strong El Nino years like this year. If you go back to past years like 2018, 2015, both of those years had very strong early season hurricanes in the Pacific. So I will not be shocked if that is something that we have happen here in the next several weeks. And it is not fear mongering. I don't want to fear monger. It's generally what I believe, and you are open to disagree with me. I will take criticism, and I will take your disagreement with that thought, with that opinion. But it is what I believe, and I laid out my case. And of course, over the next several weeks, we will see whether or not it actually happens. Meanwhile, in the Atlantic, sea surface temperature anomalies are slightly above normal, especially in the Gulf and off the southeast coast, the typical areas we watch for early on in the hurricane season, which we are approaching. I mean, we could technically say we are already in the early part of the hurricane season in the Atlantic, although that officially starts in 2 days from now on June 1st. But we have above normal sea surface temperature anomalies across the Caribbean, Gulf, and especially off the southeast coast. And as I'll show you in a little bit, the models are starting to do something, interesting here off the southeast coast over the next several days. And sea surface temperature anomalies are very warm there right now and decently above normal. So maybe we will have to watch and see whether or not something does happen here in the Atlantic. And I mean, it makes sense because we are May 30th, only 2 days away from the start of the hurricane season. So it's only a matter of time before something happens. Here's the Nino 3.4. The latest value. This is the raw Nino 3.4. Sometimes I like to show the relative Nino. Sometimes I like to show the raw Nino 3.4, but this is the raw Nino 3.4. And this is basically an average of the sea surface temperature anomalies kind of in between the eastern and central Pacific. So roughly this region right in here. And the average right now is 1.1 degrees Celsius above normal. So continuing to warm up, especially since April. We've kind of seen a leveling out in recent weeks. We're still warming, but not as much, especially not nearly as much as April. But again, especially with these westerly wind anomalies here, which are really going to kick into overdrive in the Pacific over the next several weeks, you bet that this map is just going to go up and up and up, and we are probably going to be soaring well into moderate El Nino territory, sea surface temperature anomaly-wise, over the next several weeks, and this El Nino is going to continue to strengthen. Here's take a look at the actual sea surface temperatures right now in the Pacific, and this is why I'm really concerned about whatever does try to develop here near the Mexican coastline and closer to Central America. Widespread sea surface temperatures, actual sea surface temperatures, by the way, in the Pacific, already in many spots at 30, 31, even a pocket or two of 32 degrees Celsius beginning to show up here in the Eastern Pacific. This is upper echelon, extremely warm sea surface temperatures, well above the necessary amount for tropical development, which is 26 degrees Celsius, although I'm pretty sure most of you are avid tropical trackers right now. So I'm pretty sure all of you know that we need at least 26 degrees Celsius when it comes to tropical development. But even if you aren't, and you didn't know that, well, now you know 26 degrees Celsius is what we need. But in many areas here in the Eastern Pacific, we are at 30, 31, even 32, especially close to the Mexican coastline. So rocket fuel for tropical development, which is why I believe we are really going to have to keep an eye out on this region here in the next 1 to 2 weeks. In the Atlantic, things are also beginning to warm up nicely. Sea surface temperatures in the Gulf are pretty much the entire Gulf now is at least 26 degrees Celsius. So the entire Gulf is now ready for tropical development. And I told you that by the end of May, the Gulf will warm up enough that everything will be good enough for tropical development. And the Gulf tends to especially warm up very quickly this time of year, and it's probably going to continue to do so here over the next several weeks. And probably most of the Gulf, when all is said and done, especially by the time we get to September, will probably be filled with 28s and 29s. And, probably for the rest of the hurricane season up until about at least October, the Gulf will always be ready for tropical development. And we're also seeing the sea surface temperatures beginning to warm up as well off the southeast coast and off the coast of Florida. Already starting to see some spots warm to as much as 28, maybe even a shading here of 29 beginning to show up off the southeast coast. And then in general, back down through the Bahamas and north of the Caribbean, 26 and 27 degrees Celsius, very prominent. So things are nice and warm and continuing to warm up across the tropics, and obviously that is going to help with development. But what is the development that we will be watching here over the next week in the Atlantic? And looking at the GFS, not much really happens. There is something that tries to get going here off the southeast coast, and I've seen some people post about it online. But it kind of looks like a hybrid low pressure here. Let's actually take a look at the wind shear and see if this is really anything that tries to get going. There's a little bit of lower wind shear, maybe a pocket or two that this could work with, but I mean, this kind of is surrounded in high wind shear for the most part. So what this seems to me is that this is more than likely a hybrid non-tropical low, but it's very close to the Carolinas coast. Maybe that's why it's getting a lot of attention, and it is probably still going to bring impacts in terms of rainfall and high wind gusts and stuff like that. Probably not really much different than if this was a tropical system or subtropical system anyways. And then it obviously moves on off to the northeast here and doesn't do much. And at least over the next 7 days, tropical development-wise, nothing much else happens here in the Atlantic Basin. So things are staying nice and quiet for now, and, maybe that might be a little bit in contradiction to sometimes me talking about maybe we'll have to watch the Atlantic as we get into early June, and I still think that will be the case. I still think we're going to have to watch and see if something does try to get going, especially in the Gulf or coming from the Caribbean or coming from whatever energy might lift northward from Central America over the next several weeks. I still think that potential is there, but at least over the next immediate few days, nothing is happening in the Atlantic, but lots of activity. And potentially some significant activity, in my opinion, is potentially on the horizon in the Pacific. And of course, we will be continuing to monitor all of this over the next several days and weeks as things continue to progress. But that's going to do it for today's tropical update. Hope you enjoyed what you saw. If you did, I would really appreciate if you like this video and comment any thoughts or questions you have below. And subscribe to my channel too. We're going to be doing these videos on a daily basis, and if you're interested in that, I would really appreciate if you go ahead and subscribe to the channel as well. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Stay safe, and I'll talk to you guys again tomorrow.